So show me the money, right? So if you've been in the compliancy and audit track today, it's audit, 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 fix it, fix it, fix it. Well, where's the how? How do we do it? And more importantly, how do I get the funding to do that? How do I prove to whomever my boss is, whoever the money man is or the money woman, that I need that particular tool and why? So this is going to break down a way of doing that for you. And I forgot my clicker, so I got to do it manually. All right, so the obligatory who am I slide. So I'm an information security officer, not a vendor. I just happen to be an information security officer with Health Tech Solutions. I'm in the healthcare field. I'm also the team chief for our defensive cyber operations element with the Kentucky National Guard. I've got some folks in the audience here too to spot check me if they need. And so basically, you know, just like everybody else, I harass my coworkers. I consider me the fun police. I'm the person that tells them no, they can't do things. But I am also, I do enjoy the beer and bourbon. I put my ticket in the bourbon out there, so hopefully I win that. So a couple things. So we got there, Cyber Shield is one of the events that we did. I've got several folks in the room here that were on that event. And then, of course, with the Army, I serve at the pleasure of the President and the needs of the Army. So that was me a couple years ago as a agriculture specialist in Afghanistan. I could really grow tomatoes in my own backyard, but I went and told people in a third world country how to grow grapes, raise chickens, and do some other things. So it's great. So there we go. On to the next one. So this is kind of what we're going to cover in the 50 minutes. I talk really fast because I've got a lot to say. If you have a question, just stop me, and we'll try to get through this. So why we do it? Why it's overwhelming, what the CIS controls are, my journey. I'll just give you kind of a story of how it came to be that I became a fangirl of the controls, and then the 85% solution, how I can get you 85% of what you need and just the first top 5 controls. The why we do it, right? So I'm sure we're all familiar with the Verizon breach report. If you haven't read it, you should. It gives you a lot of industry-specific information. I'll read the few first pages and then scroll down to my own industry and kind of pop around. PrivacyRights.org, 1 billion records have been breached since 2005 of the 7,000 breaches. And then, of course, phishing, right? So phishing is our big vector right now, and it kind of breaks it down into different industries. So like my industry, healthcare, 10% of are susceptible to phishing attacks there. Where manufacturing, you've got 13%. You know, where do you fall on that? Where should you be putting your money? Is that going to be, are you in education or are you in manufacturing? Need to know where you are in order to know how to get there. So, let's see. And so just a quick, that's all right. So this is me and my team. No, I didn't misspeak. That's the rest of my team. So this is me when I got my first ISO job. They're like, hey, come on in, security. I'm like, great, I'm really great at managing people. They're like, yeah, we got some people for you. And I showed up and I'm like, where's my people? Because I'm a really good manager. They're like, oh, by the way, it's just you. So quick, you know, I went from federal government to healthcare. I went from one set of acronyms to another set of acronyms, and I needed to learn on the fly really quickly. So all this stuff started flying at me. We had frameworks and HIPAA and law and FISMA and DIACAP and high-tech and ISO and all this stuff. I'm like, what the heck do I do? And then they're like, oh, and here's all the tools. And then all of a sudden these vendors started coming at me, and they were like, hey, buy my thing, and hey, buy my thing, and here's this. And every time I put a card in a fishbowl, no offense to any vendors out there, because I do like to win stuff, so I understand it's a quid pro quo. And so I was just overwhelmed. Now what am I going to do? Because I really got to narrow this down, because I only like to work 40, 50 hours a week. I do want to spend time with my family, and I want to keep my job and know all of the people that work at my company's jobs as well. So that's when the CIS controls came as a big bright light in the sky, shined down on me, and gave me an option there of what I could do. They could narrow down that scope and help me kind of get something that I could implement, I could audit, and I could find solutions for the risks and the problems that we were facing at that time. So this is basic background. And who here uses the controls already? Anybody? All right, so it's there's 20 of them altogether. They went from 2008. They started off as the critical security controls. They've since dropped the critical. Basically, they're down to CIS controls. And it went from SANS, so SANS Top 20, if you've heard of those. So SANS Top 20, they moved it over to CIS so that it would be nonprofit, and they could kind of split up from them and not have to worry about any undue kind of influence, and get that into a sphere where we can continue to support it and continue to work with it without it becoming vendor specific or owned by a certain group. So first assessment, be gentle. And just a side note, I like to find like funny little memes for slides. Don't Google be gentle, all right? I learned all sorts of stuff, but not the stuff that would be relevant to this class. So develop a plan, right? So I said, all right, this is how we're going to do the assessment. We're going to do it. We're going to take it slow. I'm going to do it a couple hours a week for a couple weeks, get the guys in. When I start to see their eyes roll back or the flames in their eyes, and I say, okay, we're going to break for now. We'll come back and we'll do this. And it was really a question and answer session that first time around. Earn their trust. I'm about to tell you how you're all dorked up. So you don't want to hear that. I need to earn your trust so that you believe that you can tell me the truth. And it's okay, because in the end, we're going to be in this together. We have a plan, and we're going to fix it. And then don't place blame. And that was the biggest thing. My IT guys don't want to admit that something is not, something is broken, or something is misconfigured, or it's not working the way it should be. And so we really had to walk through the process, because where I grew up, it was always the distant end, right? It was never my stuff, it's their stuff. And so for me to come in and say, all your stuff's dorked up, it really took a lot of finesse and some hand-holding, so I really wanted to be gentle along the way. And I needed to figure out what tools we needed to do the job. So what I did in mine, I'll go through my journey and then we'll walk through what SANS recommends at this point. So what I did is we went through the 20 controls, we went through each step, and I said, security on wireless, is this set up? And they'll have specific questions for you to ask. Do you have this configured? Do you have that configured? And it's a step-by-step, and we'll show you the tool that does that and those specific questions here in a few minutes. But what I did is I took all of that information, and it's based on the NIST 800-53. So each one of those controls is crosswalked to the SANS or to the CIS controls. And so I can say, okay, well, access control is a priority 1. So if something was missing in access control, that's a high priority for me to fix because it's a P1. So I went for P1, P2s, and P3s, and we got a P0 in there as well. And then I took that and I overlaid what tool I thought, and there's better tools here, but this was the first time that I tried. I said, what tool do I need to fix that thing? And in this first time, and it was a brand new company, I think like 37% of the problems or the risks that we currently had could be mitigated by implementing, this time we had chose like SCCM. So I could mitigate those risks. And now I had something specific to show to my CEO and my COO that said, this is the thing. We don't like seeing this big red thing, right? I've got 63% of these vulnerabilities, and of that, 37% can be mitigated if I implement SCCM. Okay, we'll implement the SCCM. How can you argue with me at that point? And so we went through the same thing. 22% was the SIM, right? We didn't have a SIM at the time. Again, it was brand new, and I said, so 22% of these issues can be mitigated if we implement a SIM solution. Well, I like that, right? I like numbers, and so we always want to be quantitative when we talk about how to fix stuff. And if I'm asking for a tool, if I'm asking to spend money, I need to show them what the result's going to be. And this was a fairly quick way of showing them those results. So, so we went through each one. And then what I did is, so this was the overall. So I said if we put all this stuff in, and some of it was simple, like security officer was stuff I had to do. So there was no money involved in that. It was just stuff that I needed to do. So I was going to do it. So then I had to make that, turn that red bubble green. And some various things there. So then I broke it down to each priority. So priority ones are the things I'm going to work at, my team are going to work at first. One thing you'll notice here, so there's 20 controls, and of the priority ones, almost all of them are in the top 5. So the top 5, as you'll see here in a minute, really mitigates most of those risks. So basically what I said is, all right, boss, if I fix these things, these vulnerabilities or these risks, I'm going to go from 63% red, I'm going to drop down, yes, there we go. I'm going to drop from 63% red down to 27% red. Well, that's good. You just do the first thing. If I just knock out the priority 1 things, I'm going to drop down from 63 down to 27. All right. And their answer was, well, go do those things. So then we go down to, then we had the priority number 2. So once I finished doing all of the first things, so now I know where to focus, and my team knows where to focus. And I'm not saying that we didn't hit some low-hanging fruit along the way, right? So, I mean, there were times when we were in the assessment, and it was hitting a radio button, making a check, clicking a checkbox here, making a quick configuration change. Now, I didn't mark them green at the time, because as far as the assessment was concerned, they were red. And that's kind of like putting it on your to-do list after you've done it, so you can check it off your to-do list at the end of the day, right? So you get credit for it. I wanted to make sure we got credit for everything that we did. But we hit that low-hanging fruit on the way, too. So here we go. Priority number 2. So now I'm going to implement, after to knock out all of the high-risk stuff, my P1s, we're going to head over to P2. And once we knock out all of P2s, we are 75, this is my assessment based on what we had and the tools we needed, we'd be at 75% green. So that's fantastic. And that gave us the big picture of how to go ahead, make those changes in a way that gave them a really clear picture of why I needed to do something, what I needed to do, and what the implementation of that was going to be. And so then, of course, we're down to the last. And I didn't get to 100% on this first go around, right? So we had some residual there. There are going to be some things in the controls that maybe your company, there's going to be reasons you cannot or will not or cannot or will not be able to implement that particular control. We only have so much money. We talk about risk. If that's not something, if that risk is so low of ever occurring, but the cost of implementing it is so high, I may choose, okay, that's a risk that is going to be a residual risk. The boss signs off on it, and then we move on. But we've gone from 63% in the red down to 6% in the red in 3 slides. See, it's like watching HGTV where they remodel a bathroom in 30 minutes. So bam, ta-da, success. It's a little bit longer than that. So now we'll go ahead and switch over to how the questions work and how you can kind of move to those in a little bit better of a way I found after my journey.
It's broken.
So, quick, somebody knows how to fix things. So we'll look at a couple of the websites real quickly just so you can get an idea. So data breaches, right? So we talked about the 1 billion data breaches since 2005. Here's the website for that, and the last slide I have does have all of those websites listed. And I'll have that. So I've got a Dropbox set up. It'll be set up for the next few days. You'll be able to download a few of these things from. So data breaches. I like this site because it goes down. So those are all the breaches we've got listed. But now you can actually dig down into that breach and get information about it. So I'm on a couple of distro lists. At any time there's a healthcare data breach, I get the information, how much that cost, how many records there were, who was it, what happened, what was the outcome. So you can pick your industry and get that same information delivered directly to you. And that's how I scare my bosses, right? I tell them, oh my goodness, so there's this hospital down in Florida that just got pinged for $1 million is because of this. So we really need to make sure we're still taking care of those things. Sometimes you gotta scare them a little bit. So you can make those selections there. And then run the report. So I like this website for research and information. I like this website because it's cool. It's got bubbles. Whoa! Look, what's this Equifax thing, right? So here you have, and I like the filters. So we can come down here and we can say, all right, I want to see all healthcare breaches, right? So then that scrolls down. It shows you all the years. And it's fascinating because you can really watch the evolution of our field, right? Like 2007, look at that, it's little dots, and then all of a sudden, about 2009 is when things started really getting rocky for us. So look at, watch that happen. You see the different, whether or not it was a lot or there were, it got quiet again right for a while, and then bam, there's Anthem. And so we do financials. There's, yeah. And then on this one, you can also dig down. So once you click on it, so you've got the read more there, and that'll take you to an article about the breach as well. So this is really neat. Again, you're able to pull in your particular sector, take a look. It's great for slide candy, when you need to throw that up there. And I talked about those priorities. Where do I get my priorities from? Here's the NIST, the National Vulnerability Database. So I pull up here, and it said access control, right? Access control is always priority number one. So anything that has to do with access control, I know that goes to the top of the list when it comes to implementing a solution to resolve whatever vulnerability that I've found in that area. And for me, I've got most all my systems fall under the moderate category. There's 159 controls for a moderate group using the NIST 800-53. So when I look at 100, when I just think of the word 100, or the number 159 controls I have to implement, I don't want to get out of bed. Or I could be like, hey, I got 20 security controls. All right, let's get some coffee and get the day going. Because those controls, all of these separate controls are nested into that framework, and that allows me to get things done and start knocking these off my to-do list, right? So this is a great way to figure out what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. Of course, you can dig down into each one of these controls. These are the families there. If you're not familiar with that website, obviously you should be. So that'll break into our tools here in a minute. And then, all right. So this comes from SANS. I actually just did go to a SANS course on the critical, around the security controls a while back. So the recommendations that I use for tools, while this is agnostic and I don't sell any of these tools, there's sample tools that they use to illustrate how you can mitigate or respond to that particular control. And then there's a list of commercial tools and a list of open source tools. And that really just depends on what fits best in your environment. I use some of the tools they recommend, but I have some other tools that either were already there when I got there and I'm continuing to use, or I've purchased because they fit better with my particular company's model. But within these next 5 tools that we'll talk about, the idea is in just 5 tools, you should be able to knock out 85% of these controls within the controls. So the first thing is the assessment. And we'll talk about, so I'm a big, right, so I do a NIST 800-53. I'm all about the HIPAA compliance. So we've got, there's NIST 800 version 4 right now. There's the NIST, there's their cyber security framework, but we also have ISO 27000. 27. IEC. So this crosswalks all of these controls with whatever industry standard that you follow. So for me on NIST, so everything I do crosswalks to how am I going to meet up with this control. So here we go. Critical security control. Number 5, controlled use of administrative privileges. That crosswalks directly to account management under the access control NIST standard. So that way I've got that checked off as I'm moving down the line. But how do I audit for it? Well, we've got something for that too. So here is the assessment tool. This is where you sit down with your team and ask them first. So the first time is ask. The second time, so I say, how do you do that? Or are you doing that? Usually I get a north-south or east-west. The second time, so now it's trust but verify, right? So I trusted them the first time when they said, yes, we do that thing. So what's my next step? To verify that they're doing it. And there are tools and automated ways to make that happen. So now I gotta go, okay, now I gotta go plug in that machine that's not on the network and wait around and see how long it takes for somebody to come walking up and be like, hey, what's that? You know, did they get alerted for it in the 60 minutes that they said they were getting alerted for it? And that's when we continue on as you mature through the process. But this is a great start. So I've kind of fluffed some numbers here. But what this shows up here, we've got your maturity level. So at a level 1, the policies are completed. And if you're like me, level 1's the hardest one because it's all about writing policies. You can go out and buy them off the internet. There's some options there, but it's really getting the policies in place. How can you implement a control if there's no policy to say that you're going to implement it? And then level 2 is that you've implemented controls 1 through 5. The goal really is to get through to level 2. The SANS instructors, the developer for this course said that he had never, he's an auditor, he had never assessed anybody over a maturity rating of 3.5. So you'll notice you've got policies complete, controls 1 through 5 implemented, all the controls implemented, automation, and then reporting. So at 3.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you got 5 numbers. You're not going to get to a 5 until you've automated it and are reporting on it consistently. And that really gets to be the hard part. Like we can get 80% there, but usually that last 20% for us is the hard thing to do. So each one of these tabs, and this is a Creative Commons license, and I've got it up, you can get it off the SANS website, or I've got it on my Dropbox for this week. So you come in here and you answer questions. So we'll go to one I haven't answered yet. So control number 3, secure configuration for hardware and software. So the first thing you do is policy defined. And when you drop down, you've got a couple options there, which is no policy, informal policy, which most of us have informal policies, right? Partially written, completely written. And it turns out that there's another level which is approved, right? So we can write them all day long, but is the policy actually approved? So once you select where you are on that, and remember it's important to be truthful. So approved is green, but written, so we've got an amber there, and it starts to move up what percentage of the risks have been addressed under that control. And so this really is, it's just a tabletop. You're sitting there with your team, and you're walking through each one, and you're asking yourself, Number 3.2, follow strict configuration management, building a secure image that is used to build all new systems as they are deployed. Are we doing that? Well, yes. Yeah, we've got a policy, and you know that one. Yep, we're good. We've got a written policy. It's been validated. It's approved. All right. So how is the control implemented? So is the whole policy implemented, right? So you can either have parts of the policy, some, most, or all. So in this case, we're going to say all. Everything that we do is off a standard image. All of that's approved. All right, great. We're looking good. Next one is automation. So this is where it gets hard, right? So is it automated? What part of the process is automated? Is it automated on some of them? So Adam, you used to load a lot of systems. Was the process completely automated? Would you consider it automated? If somebody were to ask you that question at that time, would you have said some of the systems are automated, most of them, or all of them?
Still had human interaction.
Yeah, right. So you'd probably say, I would say, in your case, I mean, it was like a factory of systems being loaded. I remember seeing them, but at some point, somebody was sticking the disk in, somebody was pulling the disk out, so it wasn't completely automated. And then that makes you think, well, how do you define automated at that point, right? So now you're thinking, well, what does that mean? I'd be happy if I just have to stick the disk in and pull the disk out. That's good for me. And that's where they leave room. This is for you, and you'll have to define a few of these. And we've had some long discussions. We'll bump into one of these, and it's like, so what does that mean? What does that mean to us? How are we going to define automated? And so there's a level at which that's where I step in and say, well, according to the NIST 800-53, and start throwing out all of the regulations, right? My guys and I, but between that is the gray area. What do we consider automated? And that's up to us. And then last is reported. So in this case, what would we report on for automating baselines? Report on all systems. So in this case, we can say, okay, well, I mean, we're going to say, yeah, we're mostly automated. There is some human interaction. But at the end of the month, I report all systems that were loaded that month. And that process is in place, and we're good to go. So there you go. At that point, you've addressed 16% of the risk under this control number 3, and you've moved over to the dashboard. So now the dashboard shows where you are in the implementation of that particular control. And you walk this through. Now you see when you go back to the Be Gentle slide, there is a reason that we want to have a plan and kind of roll this out slowly the first time, because you will get some fatigue sitting in a conference room thinking about each one of these subsections in the question. How do we do it? Some of the stuff you'd be like, oh, well, shucks, we really hadn't thought about that before if you're a smaller company. Or if you're a larger organization, well, shoot, okay, who do we need to go to get the answer for that? And start bringing those pieces in. So I said that the top 5 really are where we're going to focus the last few minutes that we have, or the last 10 minutes that I have here, is where you get the most bang for your buck, right? So what are we going to do for that? And it turns out that there are some recommended tools. I did promise some, at least show you how to do it, get your money's worth. So we'll go back here. Coming? There we go. So we talked about the implementation percentages by the controls. So you walk through and this will show you. So again, another beautiful dashboard, another great slide for those who are into slideology, and some eye candy there for the bosses. So now we got to find the right tool to do the job. All right, so that's the most important part. We're like, yeah, great, processes and reports, wonderful. How do I do my job, and how do I do it well, and how do I only work 40 or 50 hours a week? So 85% solution and 5 controls. So what I do is, because I do fall under NIST 800-53, is I crosswalk each one of the controls to the controls in the NIST. So if I implement inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices, the number one thing you should do, you shouldn't do anything else before you make sure that you are, because if something is on your network and you don't know it, how are you supposed to protect it? How are you supposed to protect your network? So that's why inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices is the number one control. And this is what it goes to in the NIST. So I say, okay, I got it, what do I do? So SANS took each one of those controls and they said, all right, these are the tools that we recommend for the controls. And they're in no particular order, and it really just depends on where you are in your journey and what you need to do. But we also have open and free sources available as well, because there are some of us that no matter how much we tell our bosses that we need something, it's going to be open NAC, I can afford, System Center, I cannot. And so those are decisions you have to make then based on the business. And so in this case, there is a sample tool here, which is the network mapper. And so these are the following tools. So let's see. Oh, this one should be
SolarWinds.
Yeah, it's SolarWinds. It's the ZenMap. So we talked about Zen. A lot of us are familiar with ZenMap and Nmap, and they're both powerful tools. But they recommend, or the sample tool here was the SolarWinds network topology mapper. And it's too bad I gotta click back through here. And that. So here we go, network mapper, right? So it gives you the tool, it gives you the website. This is all right. You can come over here and take a look. It recommends commercial, and there's one, like I said, OpenBoss is open source solution that it recommends for control number 2. But it talks about if you use this particular tool or a tool similar, you will be able to complete the automation process of that particular control. So in this case, it's the network topology mapper. It's making sure it goes out there and it collects and knows all your nodes. It shows up. It's pretty cool. You can click on the video and watch it. So that's the control there. And then go to the next one. What do I get? All right, so number 2. Number 2 will pop up here in a second, and it's inventory of authorized and unauthorized software, right? So we've got the devices first, and then next the software. And remember, it's inventory of authorized and unauthorized software. Is iTunes an authorized or unauthorized software on your network?
Depends on your policy.
I don't care, right? I mean, what I care about is, do I know iTunes is on my network? If it's part of my policy, it's part of my policy. I don't care. If the boss says you can have it, you can have it. What I care about is whether or not I know you have it. Because I have to know you have it in order to keep it updated. And so that's where it comes into authorized. Try not to get hung up. I mean, I can say boss, and I say, hey boss, my recommendation is that we only have business software on our systems. Because I have a tiny group of people over here, and we don't want to have a bunch of whole extra work managing the updates for a bunch of superfluous software that you let your people have. And by the way, they're keeping, copyrighted song material on your network that you're paying storage fees for, so you can go that route. Regardless, at the end of the day, my job is to protect it. So I just need to know it's there. And this is where we get into continuous monitoring, your baseline configurations. There are some, there's quick scripts that you can run to do baseline configurations if you're that small. What was my baseline configuration this morning? What was it this afternoon? What's my delta, right? What's the change? And then there are some commercial and some open source options for that as well. And so this is really, again, you have to think about the policies and the culture. You know, I came from one culture on the federal government side, which was lock it down, lock it down. I think we were the last people in the free world to be able to access Facebook between 8 and 5, right? And that's fine. That was our culture. So what do you think happened when I showed up in the civilian world? One, I was the first person in the office every morning, and two, I'm like, what do you mean? What's going on here? Why you guys have administrator privileges to your laptops? Not anymore. So it took a while. I'm still working on it. Some people still turn the other way when I walk down the hallway, but they'll get used to me. So again, it's really about culture. And the important thing is that you figure out what that culture is. You write the policies, and then you begin. That's why policies are number one, right? I can't take away your iTunes until my boss lets me write a policy that says I can take it away. And that way I can say, well, it says right here, oh, look, there's a signature. And by the way, now I'm going to automate that process, right? Because now I don't even have to come to you. It's just going to disappear off your computer, and then you're going to call IT, and IT's going to be like, oh, read this policy. You can't do that. So, and if you don't like it, go see the security officer, because she's used to people not liking her. So I try to keep candy at the desk at least. And we all know, I think that we would all know why this is important when it comes to exploitation, right? It's, once the adversary is in your network, they will slowly but eventually find a privileged account. And so that is why this is so important. And I believe that we probably are all very well versed in that concept here. So the tools, right? So what are we going to do for this one? Give me the tool to fix this. What is my holy grail? Well, it's not really a holy grail. And there's a couple on here. SpiceWorks is one where you get like half these people are going to say, oh, SpiceWorks is horrible. The other half's going to be like, it's quick, it's easy, it suits me. All right? I'm in a small company. SpiceWorks, fast and easy. There are people in this room that SpiceWorks is not going to work for their company, right? Yeah. So they have to go with something that's a little bit more robust. And in here, this one I have not actually tried, but it looks really cool, is, oh, I didn't say the name of the sample tool. That's a weird website. Oh, it's Nuke Pro. Where? Oh, there it is, Nuke Professional. So again, it's got a website as well, and you go there, it shows you the different screenshots, but it goes out and it pulls everything, and it says, boom, 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 here's all your nodes, here's the Windows software, here's the version it's running, here's the information. And so that is very quick. That's what I need, is quick, right? Because I want to go home at the end of the day. They started happy hour at 5, not at 7. Let's get out of here. So, so these are some great tools. And again, the slides will be there. So this is it. Bam. Tool number 2. We're almost there. Number 3, secure configurations for hardware and software. So when you start off at a small company and you're buying one laptop at a time, you are configuring one laptop at a time. Every time there's a new user, you're going through, because you don't have the licensing to start being able to run that process. So this is actually pretty hard. And if you notice, I forgot to add some of those priorities there. This has got a lot of controls available. So the first 2, I just had, this many. Well, now we've got these as well. So now we've got flaw remediation in there, acquisition process. How am I getting the laptops? How am I getting my hardware? Information system monitoring, configuration settings, least functionality, right? Make sure that they can do the least possible. So there's a lot of stuff in this. And all of a sudden, we've gathered all of these, so rather than 159 controls, I'm on number 3. And just by implementing these tools and then answering those questions, I am able, at that point, to identify and say, yes, I've met that control. Yes, I've met that control. Because I do a system security configuration for each one of my systems. And it's like the smallest one I can find to do is, I think, 35 pages of the NIST, each control on there, and it's my least favorite part of the job, right? So the tool here, Qualys, is the one that's recommended as a sample tool. If you go take a look at their website, that'll show you what if you implemented that would meet most of what's in the control number 3. And then, of course, one of the things I notice anytime it's in green, it means it's already in a recommendation for one of the other controls. So, fortunately, it's PowerShell, right? So with PowerShell, if we use the WMI object or the CIMI or CIM instance, that you've already got PowerShell. So that's, if you live it, learn it, love it. If you're going to the class at DerbyCon, then that might be something, especially if you're small enough, that you can knock this out without actually having other tools. If you want, that's already in your toolbox. So these are some options here, again, for the commercial side, the free side, for implementing number 3. So then on to my favorite. Oh wait, no, that's not my favorite. The next one's my favorite. This one, this is continuous vulnerability assessment remediation. This is like nobody's favorite. But this is the security assessments. This is a continuous monitoring. Oh, the SIM and the logs, and it's where they're at, and they're so important, and they're so incredibly boring. But it's how we do our job, right? And it's a requirement, that vulnerability scanning. So, and this one, there's a lot of stuff that's available out there, especially the government now, the federal government. I know the first time I was like, hey boss, so we're going to do this thing, like Department of Homeland Security is going to start scanning our stuff. He's like, but it doesn't sound like a good idea at all. I'm like, I know, but hear me out, right? And at first, because that was my first thoughts, I'm like, oh, I really want them to know, right? Like, I get in trouble if I do something wrong and I get fined. So now I'm going to turn around and have the same people scan my box for the vulnerability and tell me, hey, by the way, you're broken. But then they're going to turn an eye, and I'm like, I feel like, the hand flinching. I'm like, I'm not sure. But it actually turns out I use it and it works out really well. The tools here. So the one I'm talking, so OpenBoss. All right, so we have Nessus, right? Everybody uses Nessus in some form or fashion. My third-party scans are from Nessus. So that's great. So Nessus used to be open source. Well, one of the problems with that is that you had a lot of pen testers. Everybody's got to make money. So they would use an open source tool and then charge you to do the assessment. And Nessus was like, it seems kind of shady. So they started charging for it, and there's some other reasons behind it too, but that's at least the fun part of the story. So OpenBoss is actually a derivative of Nessus. It's got a lot of the same functionality. It's open source still, and it's really, even for SANS in this particular case, was the recommended sample tool for this control. So here you have a control, number 4, with the tool recommended to meet that control being open source. So this one, you're like, hey boss, I already fixed that and I fixed it for free. So I tell my boss all the time, in order to spend money, I've got to save money. So I find a place to save money, and I'm like, hey, guess what? I just saved you $15,000 this year. It's like, wow, that's great, that's great. So I have this tool that I need to purchase now. It's $16,000. So really, it's only like $1,000. So that's how I make my money. Is first I go find out how to save it, and then I spend it. So in this one, I actually did this. This one I did. This is where I got it there. So OpenBoss for in my internal stuff, I need to do third-party scans. So DHS does NCATS. So NCATS, you go send an email to NCATS@info. They send you the packet. They will scan all your front-facing machines. They send you the vulnerability assessment. And the nice thing is it's a very small one. So Nessus is great, but I don't have time for noise, right? I've got too much else going on. I need a report that tells me this is what's broken, this is what you need to fix, and oh, by the way, this is how you fix it. And so they do a great job. I get a weekly scan. It scans my boxes every 7 days, sends me a report. You have this vulnerability, suite 32, usually a lot of little SSL stuff. Moderate, medium, low, it shows you that, it shows you over time. I pull out some of the graphs when we've got no vulnerabilities because we're small, so we don't have a whole lot that's front facing. Throw that into the RFPs to show how awesome I am. So it's a really great tool. They also do pen testing. They'll come on site. We actually talked to the DHS guy 2 months ago at a cyber workshop. and he talks about it as well. So it's a really great tool. Go check them out, because that's free money. You're going to get scanned. You've got it already once a week. Very small, very concise. Last one here is controlled use of administrative privileges. See, this one's my favorite, right? This is like, stop! I literally walked into a company and they all had admin access, and then I found out that's not really, because I grew up, that wasn't a thing. Like, I was with the federal government. Like, it's never a thing. The civilian world, it's taking a longer amount of time for that to kind of catch on as not being a thing. And it's hard. When you want to pull somebody's admin rights from them, it's not a pretty day, especially if they're an executive. And so there's a lot of great ways to fix that. You'd have a whole class on showing your boss why they should not be an administrator, right? Like, take a vulnerability and exploit it in front of them and show them what's going to happen when somebody phishes them. Like, my COO gets phished all the time, right? So show that phish, do it, show the exploit, and then you'll be like, oh, well, I don't want that anymore. Show them why they don't want to be administrators. That's the hard part, because they're the most vulnerable. So quickly, here's the tools for number 5. On this one, it's the SCC, the Access Auditor, the website there. Again, you still got the PowerShell commands that you can use if that's something that you're able. And this one, we don't have, pretty much it's all just commands, right? They got Linux commands and PowerShell commands there. That's a lot of manual work. If you don't have time, you want to check out the industry tools. There they are. And some of the stuff's actually already built in. Look for the stuff that's built in. The vast, 99% of us have got Active Directory, some kind of Microsoft environment. See that's already there that you're just not taking advantage of. And then would be remiss to show you the business side of it, right? This would be how you build that program. Top level decisions to implement the controls. Assign a program manager who will be responsible, be the pusher. What's the long-term sustainability of your defense? Start with the gap analysis. Do that. Show your boss where you guys are. And it's hard to say I'm broken, but you're never going to get what you need unless you show them that you. This is like when your kid comes up to you and asks for a Band-Aid. What's the first thing I do? I'm like, where are you bleeding? Right? I'm not going to give you a Band-Aid unless you show me where you're bleeding. Show them that you're bleeding. It hurts. It hurts deep down inside. It can be soul-sucking to show somebody that you're not perfect. But you're not going to get your Band-Aid. You're not going to get the fix unless you do it. Long-term plans, definitions and goals. Embed that into your security policy. Make it part of it. Do assessments, and then, of course, educate your workforce. So here's the reference websites. I'll have this information up on the Dropbox. There's the website there. There's my information, and I think I'm finished. That was kind of like a sprint. You never know. Like, I want to put so much in there, and I know I've got such a condensed amount of time. So if you have any questions, come up and see me. Send me an email, and I can give you some more information on the controls. It's been a career saver so far for me. So thank you guys.